So let us speak about edema, definition and pathogenesis. Edema is a pathological accumulation of fluid in tissues, mainly in interstitial spaces and also in cells. So what about pathogenesis of edema? Which factors playing role of edema? We have some factors. First factor is hemodynamic factor. Hemodynamic factor. What is this factor? We know that inside the vessels we have hydrostatic pressure. What is hydrostatic pressure? When the blood flow, it's press on wall like this. This is artery part, this is vein part, this is capillary. Here also we have hydrostatic pressure, which is press on the wall of the vessel from inside. Due to this pressure, we can push substances, oxygen, water from arteries, from arterial side into cells. Here we have cells. They receive substances, oxygen, and so on to carrying out metabolism. Then normally water and CO2 and endoproducts, they will leave tissue from venous side to pass to vein, into vein, inside vein. So hydrostatic pressure inside arterial vessels, it's high, but hydrostatic pressure inside veins is low. Here about 30-35, here about 10 or 15. It's normally. But in some cases, if the pressure, hydrostatic pressure in vein side will be high due to, for example, systemic problem, for example, heart failure, heart cannot receive the blood from veins, so the blood in veins will be congested and hydrostatic pressure will be high here. Or it could be local, something press vein or inside vein, for example, thrombosis. In these cases, hydrostatic pressure here will be high, so water cannot leave tissue and it will still here. So water cannot leave tissue to the vein, cannot leave, so water will still here. And even water from veins will get out from veins here to the tissue, so the water will be accumulated in tissue. This is edema, first factor. This factor we call it hemodynamic factor. This factor plays role in case of cardiac edemas, and also in inflammation, case of inflammation, because in inflammation also we have venous hyperemia due to pressing something on the vein in case of exudation in inflammatory area. Also we will have edema, hemodynamic factor. This is first factor. Second factor is oncotic factor. What is oncotic factor? In our vessels, inside, near with wall, we have proteins like this. These proteins playing role as a barrier. They create oncotic pressure. What is oncotic pressure? They don't allow water to leave vessel because they attract water to itself like this. So they play role as barrier. These proteins in some cases could be lost it means they could be less than. So oncotic pressure will be less, so water can leave vessel and causing edema also. In which cases it could be anything which lead to hypoproteinemia, decreasing amount of protein in blood. It will lead to oncotic factor of edema. For example, starvation, no food intake, mainly no protein intake, so low protein. For example, liver diseases, because in liver we have the main production of protein, so will be less of protein also in liver disease. Also, when we lose protein in case of burning, this explain why in burning area we have swelling and swelling full with fluid. It's because we lost protein in case of burning. And also in renal diseases, nephrotic syndrome, for example, we lost protein with urine. And also it will lead to some swelling surrounding the eye, for example. This is oncotic factor of edema. Next factor is vascular factor of edema. The problem in vascular factor is depend on the vascular tone or vascular permeability of wall. The permeability of wall. This. In case of vascular dilation, the permeability will be high, and water can freely leave the vessel and causing edema. It could be due to, for example, affecting of vasodilators substances in case of inflammation also, because we have mediators which can be raised from inflammatory area, and they can affect vascular wall and causing vasodilation. In case of damage, trauma, these cells and the tissues will be damaged, and some substances will be also raised, and they can affect vascular wall and causing dilation. In case of any toxic products, poisoning, in allergy also, allergic mediators, for example, histamine and prostaglandin, they also affect our vessels and causing dilation, causing edema. This factor is vascular factor. Fourth factor is lymphogenic factor. Lymphogenic factor, we know that we have the neighbor vessel with our arteria and veins, lymph vessel also helping veins to receive also water and big substances, I mean big molecular substances, and also fat and so on. In case of any obstruction of lymph, so water and these major substances will be accumulated here, and they activate very high osmotic pressure. So they will attract water even from vein and from lymph here, and it will be very heavy edema, big edema. The most common disease in this case is elephant disease. Elephant disease, when the leg become as an elephant leg due to some filarial parasites, they causing obstruction in lymph. This is lymphogenic factor. Fifth factor is tissue factor. In tissue factor, the problem not in vessels. Vessels could be normal, The problem in main tissue here, in the tissue, in the cell. In some cases of hypoxia, it will lead to accumulation of substances in products or other products of a metabolism disorder due to hypoxia. They will be accumulated also here, and they activate osmotic and oncotic pressure, because they could be also proteins and some amino acids accumulated in tissue, and they will attract water to itself. This playing role in case of hypoxia, in case of anything which lead to tissue hypoxia. For example, avitaminosis, vitamin B1, vitamin PP. In case of primary tissue damage, for example, trauma in tissue, also these cells will be damaged and substances will be accumulated here and attract water. This is tissue factor. Last factor is neurogenic factor, or humoral factor. We know that the main two hormones which regulate our water and electrolytes in our body is vasopressin. It means anti-diuretic hormone, and aldosterone. Vasopressin retain water, keep water. Aldosterone keep sodium in the body. Water, sodium. In any case which lead to mistake in production of ADH or aldosterone, it means they will be produced high antidiuretic hormone or high aldosterone due to some pituitary diseases, hypothalamus disease, or adrenal diseases. So it will, if we have ADH high, so the water will be accumulated in the body because it retains water normally. Aldosterone, if will be high, so sodium will be retained in body, and it will keep water. And also both or everyone can lead to edema. This factor is humoral or neurogenic factor of edema. So we have these factors of edema: hemodynamic factor, oncotic factor, vascular, lymphogenic, tissue, and neurogenic factors of edema. And thank you very much.